I came home after a 16-hour shift, my phone dead, my body barely holding together. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My daughter's bedroom door was locked from the inside. I knocked once, then harder. No answer. When I turned around, my mother was standing in the hallway, calm, composed, already finished with the conversation I hadn't even started. "We took a vote," she said. "You don't get a say." That was the moment I understood this wasn't about concern. It wasn't about help. And it definitely wasn't about my child's best interest. It was about control. And if they believed they could decide my daughter's life without me, they had no idea what I was about to decide next. Because this time, I wasn't asking anyone for permission. I came home at 2:11 a.m., still wearing my scrubs, my phone dead in my pocket, my legs buzzing the way they do when you've been upright for too long, and adrenaline is the only thing holding you together. The house lights were on. That should have been my first warning. Normally, the place was dark by 10. My parents liked to talk about routines, about how children needed structure, about how noise traveled in old houses. But tonight, every room glowed softly, staged and awake, like I'd walked into the middle of a plan. I closed the door quietly behind me and listened. No cartoon theme song drifting from the hallway, no soft humming from the bedroom where Marlo usually sang herself to sleep. No padded footsteps running toward me, asking why I was home so late again. Just voices, adult voices, controlled, low. The kind people use when they think they're being reasonable. My chest tightened. "Marlo?" I called, keeping my voice light, like I wasn't already counting exits in my head. No answer. I walked down the hallway, past the family photos my mother insisted on rehanging every year. Past the door to my parents' room, past the bathroom where I'd once slept on the floor during a flu week because it was closer to the sink. I stopped in front of my daughter's bedroom. The door was closed. That wasn't unusual. The lock clicking when I turned the handle was... It didn't budge. Locked, from the inside. I knocked once, then harder. "Marlo," I said, sharper now. "Open the door." Silence. My pulse began to race, fast and loud, drowning out everything else. I knocked again, louder, panic bleeding into my voice despite my effort to hold it back. "What's going on?" My sister Paige appeared at the end of the hallway, barefoot, wearing leggings and a sweatshirt I didn't recognize. Her hair was pulled back like she'd been working, not sleeping. "Oh," she said. "You're home." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Why is her door locked?" I asked. Paige shrugged. "It's being handled." "Handled how?" I demanded. Before she could answer, my mother's voice floated in from the kitchen. "Eliza, come here." I didn't move. I tried the door again, harder this time, pressing my shoulder into it like force alone might undo whatever had already happened. "Where is my daughter?" I asked. Footsteps approached. Then my mother, Judith, stepped into view, dish towel still in her hands. My father followed a step behind her, arms crossed, expression already set. Judith smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, decisively. "We took a vote," she said. The words didn't land right away. My brain rejected them on impact, like they were in the wrong language. "You did what?" I asked. "You've been working too much," she continued, as if I'd asked about groceries. "You're exhausted. This isn't healthy for her." "Unlock the door," I said. "Now." My father cleared his throat. "Eliza, calm down." I laughed once, short, sharp. "You locked my child in a room and you want me calm?" Paige leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." I turned on her. "Where is she?" Judith lifted her chin. "She's not here." The hallway seemed to tilt. "What do you mean, not here?" I asked, my voice suddenly too quiet. "She's with people who can be present," Judith said. "People who aren't gone 16 hours a day." "You gave her to Connor?" I said, the name tasting wrong. Paige nodded. "It makes sense. He's her father." "He doesn't answer his phone," I said. "He hasn't seen her in months." Judith waved a hand. "Biology matters." I stared at her, something cold forming behind my ribs. "You didn't ask me," I said. Judith's smile tightened. "We voted. You don't get a say. That was the moment the house stopped feeling like a home. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about concern, or help, or even Marlowe's well-being. It was about control. I took a slow breath and looked at each of them in turn. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. I'm going to find my daughter, I said. And when I do, things are going to change. Paige scoffed. You're overreacting. My father shook his head. You'll regret this. Judith met my eyes, confident, certain. You don't have the authority, she said. I smiled then, not because I was amused, because I finally understood what they'd underestimated. They thought exhaustion made me weak. They forgot what it had taught me instead. I didn't argue with them. That surprised me. Old Eliza would have shouted, demanded explanations, tried to pull the truth out of them by force. Old Eliza would have stayed in that hallway until someone broke. But the woman standing there now felt something colder take over. Clean, sharp, almost clinical. I turned away from my parents and went straight to Marlowe's room. The lock stared back at me like an insult. I didn't knock this time. I twisted the handle hard, then stepped back and kicked the door just below the knob. The wood rattled, but the frame held. Paige gasped. What are you doing? Getting my house back, I said. My father grabbed my arm. Stop it. I shook him off. Don't touch me. Judith's voice snapped. Eliza, you are being irrational. I turned on her so fast she stepped back. You sent my child away without telling me. If you think I care about sounding rational right now, you've lost your mind. Silence fell. Not the stunned kind, but the tense kind that meant they were recalculating. I looked around the room. Marlowe's nightlight was gone. Her blanket, the one she refused to sleep without, was missing. The small pink backpack she took everywhere wasn't hanging on the chair. They hadn't just moved her. They'd prepared. Where are her things? I asked. Paige hesitated. Judith answered instead. They're with her. With who? I said. Connor? Judith nodded. And his parents, Vivian and Robert. They agreed this was best. A sharp laugh escaped me. You coordinated this. We discussed it, my father said. Like adults. You held a secret meeting about my child, I shot back. That's not a discussion. That's a coup. Judith folded her arms. You're always gone. Someone had to step in. I work to keep this house standing, I said. The same house you begged me to put in my name. Her jaw tightened. There it was, the crack. Paige rolled her eyes. Don't make this about money. Oh, I absolutely will, I said. Because the moment you decided I was good enough to carry your debt, but not good enough to raise my own daughter, you crossed a line you don't get to uncross. My father raised his voice. You're not calling the police. I smiled slightly. Watch me. I pulled my phone from my pocket and plugged it into the charger on the hallway table. The screen lit up. 1%. Enough. Judith stepped forward. If you do that, you'll make things worse. For who? I asked. You. Paige scoffed. Connor agreed. You can't undo that. I can, I said, already scrolling, because I didn't consent. I hit record before calling. Not the police. Not yet. First, Connor. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Then again. Nothing. Judith exhaled loudly. See? He's busy. He's avoiding me, I said. There's a difference. I turned the phone so they could see the screen. 3 unanswered calls. Timestamps clear. Then I started recording audio openly. Judith's eyes widened. What are you doing? Documenting, I said calmly. Say it again. All of it. Stop that, my father barked. I looked at him. Or what? Judith straightened. We took a vote, she repeated. Slower now. We decided Eliza is not capable of providing consistent care. I nodded. Perfect. Keep going. Paige snapped. You're insane. Insane is thinking you can give a child away without consequences, I said. I ended the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? Judith demanded. To get my daughter. You don't know where she is, Paige said. I walked to the front door and pulled it open. I know exactly where you'd send her. My father followed me onto the porch. If you leave like this, don't come back. I turned and looked at him under the porch light. Really looked. This isn't your house, I said, And you don't get to ban me from my own life. Judith appeared behind him. You don't have authority here. I paused, keys in hand, heart steady. You keep saying that, I replied. And you're about to learn how wrong you are. I stepped off the porch and into the night. In the car, I finally let my hands shake. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I drove. Because while they were congratulating themselves on a decision already made, they'd forgotten something critical. They'd voted. I was about to act. The road out of the neighborhood curved sharply, and I took it too fast. Streetlights smeared into long yellow lines across the windshield. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel, not because I was afraid of crashing, but because loosening my grip felt like admitting how close I was to falling apart. I called Connor again. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message this time. I didn't have anything left to say that wouldn't sound like begging, and I refused to give him that. At the next red light, I pulled over and checked my phone properly. Missed calls. None from him. None from numbers I didn't recognize. I scrolled through old messages instead, searching for patterns I'd ignored before. Excuses. Delays. The careful distance of a man who liked the idea of a child more than the responsibility of one. My mother hadn't chosen him because he was capable. She'd chosen him because he was convenient. I started the car again and headed toward the one place that made sense. The Hale house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with identical trees, trimmed into obedience. I'd only been there twice before. Both times, Vivian Hale had smiled too brightly and offered tea I didn't drink. I parked crooked in the driveway and got out without turning the engine off. The porch light clicked on before I reached the door. Vivian opened it halfway, blocking the view behind her. "Eliza," she said, as if she were greeting a delivery. "This isn't a good time." "Where is my daughter?" I asked. "She's asleep," Vivian replied. "And she's staying." The calm in her voice felt rehearsed. "I'm coming in," I said. "No," she said, placing her hand flat against the door. Connor agreed to this. I leaned closer. "Connor doesn't answer his phone. He's overwhelmed," she said. "This is an adjustment." "Unlock the door," I said. Her smile tightened. "You're emotional." I heard movement behind her. A chair scraping, a soft footstep. "Marlo," I called. Silence. Then a small voice drifted down the hallway. "Mom?" Vivian flinched. That was all it took. I pushed past her and stepped inside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something burnt. Too clean. Too controlled. I followed the sound of my daughter's voice to the kitchen. Marlo sat at the table, feet dangling, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She wore pajamas that weren't hers. Her eyes widened when she saw me. She didn't run. She stared. I crossed the room and dropped to my knees in front of her. "Hey, baby." She looked at Vivian, then back at me. "Grandma said you signed papers." The words hit like a blow. "I did not," I said gently. "That's not true." Vivian cleared her throat. "We explained it in a way she could understand." "You lied," I said, standing slowly. "To a child." Robert Hale appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Lower your voice." I turned on him. "You don't get to set rules for me." Marlo's lip trembled. "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt again immediately, taking her hands. "No. Never. None of this is because of you." Vivian stepped closer. "Eliza, this isn't healthy. You're exhausted. She needs stability." "She needs honesty," I snapped. "And she needs her mother." Robert shook his head. Connor agreed. "Then Connor can explain himself to the police," I said. Vivian stiffened. "Don't threaten us." "I'm not threatening," I replied. "I'm retrieving my child." I stood and reached for Marlo's backpack. Sitting by the door, already packed. They'd planned this. I took her hand. Vivian blocked the exit. "You can't just take her." "I absolutely can," I said. "And if you stop me, you'll be explaining that to an officer." Marlo squeezed my fingers hard like she was afraid I might disappear again. Robert studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside. Vivian's mouth fell open. "Robert!" "Let them go," he said quietly. I didn't wait for permission. I walked out with my daughter, the night air hitting us like freedom and fear all at once. In the car, Marlo climbed into the passenger seat and buckled herself with shaking hands. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said, starting the engine. We're leaving. Are they mad? Yes, I said. But that's not your problem. She nodded slowly, absorbing it the way children do when they're given the truth without decoration. I pulled out of the driveway and didn't look back. At the corner, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Bring her back. You're making a mistake. I set the phone face down. They thought they could hand my child off like a package. They'd forgotten something important. I don't return what was never theirs. I didn't drive home. Not to the Warren house. Not back into their orbit. I took the freeway instead, heading nowhere specific, just away. Marlo watched the road from the passenger seat, her fingers still locked around the strap of her backpack like it might vanish if she let go. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere safe, I said. She nodded and leaned her head against the window. The city lights slid past in broken lines. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting lightly on her knee, grounding us both. My phone buzzed again, then again. I didn't look. 10 minutes later, headlights flared in my rearview mirror. Too close, too persistent. A familiar car. My father's. My stomach dropped. He flashed his brights once. I merged into the next lane and accelerated. He stayed with me. Mama? Marlo said softly. It's okay, I told her, even as my pulse spiked. Stay buckled. At the next exit, I signaled late and took it fast. Tires squealed. My father followed, horn blaring now, the sound sharp and angry in the quiet night. This wasn't a conversation. This was a pursuit. I pulled into a well-lit gas station and parked near the front doors, cameras visible, people around. My father screeched to a stop behind me and got out, face red, hands already gesturing. Eliza, he shouted, you can't just take her? I stepped out and shut my door carefully, placing myself between him and Marlo. She's my child, I said. Get back in your car. You're kidnapping her, he snapped. I laughed once, cold. Say that louder. Let everyone hear. He glanced around. A man at the pump watched openly now. The cashier stared through the glass. My father lowered his voice. Your mother is losing her mind. Then you should go home, I said, and take care of her. You're making this worse, he said. We were trying to help. I pulled my phone out and held it up. I'm recording. His mouth snapped shut. You followed me, I continued calmly. You're harassing me in public. You want to keep going? He looked past me to the car. Marlo, honey, do not talk to her, I said, stepping closer. One more word and I call the police. For a long second, I thought he might push it. Then he turned, swore under his breath, and got back into his car. He peeled out of the lot without looking back. I stood there for a moment, shaking now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. When I got back in the car, Marlo reached for my hand immediately. Are we safe? She asked. Yes, I said. And this time, it felt true. We checked into Cedar Row Motel just after 3. The place smelled like old carpet and bleach, but the door locked solidly and the curtains closed all the way. I pushed a chair under the handle and sat on the bed while Marlo brushed her teeth with a tiny hotel toothbrush. She crawled under the covers fully dressed and curled toward me. Can you stay? She asked. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She fell asleep fast. Too fast, like her body had finally given up. I lay there listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant whoosh of cars on the highway, replaying the night in sharp fragments. The lock on her door, the vote, the lie. My father chasing us down. This wasn't over. At dawn, I called Thomas Reed. He answered on the second ring. Eliza, they took my child, I said. I got her back. I need to know what to do next. There was a pause. Then, are you safe? Yes. Good, he said. Then listen carefully. I took notes as he spoke. Custody, documentation, timelines. I emailed him the audio recording from the house and the timestamps of Connor's unanswered calls. Do not go back there, he said. Not alone, and don't respond to them directly. What about school? I asked. Keep her routine, he replied. And Eliza, file for a temporary protective order, today. When I hung up, I felt something settle into place. Not calm. Resolve. Marlo woke an hour later and ate dry cereal on the bed, feet swinging. "Do I still go to school?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and I'll be there when you get out." She nodded, relieved by the normalcy. As we drove, my phone buzzed with a new message, from Paige this time. "You embarrassed Dad. Mom's not okay. You need to fix this." I deleted it without replying. At the school drop-off, Marlo hugged me hard, then ran inside without looking back. I sat in the car and breathed. They thought last night would scare me into returning. They were wrong, because fear had already done its worst. Now it was my turn to decide what came next. The school drop-off bought me exactly 6 hours. 6 hours where no one could corner me in a hallway, no one could grab my arm, no one could rewrite the night into something more convenient. I drove straight back to Cedar Row Motel, parked under the camera by the office, and sat in the car until my breathing slowed. Then I went inside and opened my laptop. Thomas Reed had already sent a checklist. Bullet points, clean, brutal. Documents, proof, control. I pulled the folder from my bag, the one I'd shoved there without thinking when I left the house. The one my mother had always insisted was just paperwork. The one that lived in the bottom drawer like a secret no one expected me to read closely. I spread everything across the bed. Mortgage transfer, title deed, payment history, notarized signatures, my name, everywhere. I stared at it longer than necessary, letting the reality land. They hadn't asked me to help. They'd asked me to replace them. Financially, legally, while keeping the authority for themselves. And I had let them. At least, that's what they thought. I opened my bank app next. The numbers were ugly but familiar. Every extra shift. Every skipped vacation. Every night I'd told myself this was temporary, that family was worth it. What they never understood was that exhaustion makes you precise. I wasn't sloppy, I was tired. And tired people read contracts very carefully. My phone buzzed. A call from Connor. I laughed once, sharp, and answered. "Now you call?" I said. "Eliza," he began, already defensive. "Your parents dragged me into this." "You agreed," I said. "You took my child. She needed stability," he replied. "I thought—" "You didn't think," I cut in. "You accepted a handoff." Silence. "I want to see her," he said finally. "No," I replied. "You can speak to my lawyer." He scoffed. "You don't get to shut me out." "I absolutely do," I said. "Especially when you don't answer your phone until the consequences arrive." I hung up before he could respond and blocked the number. The next call came from my mother. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Paige. I ignored all of it and dialed Thomas Reed instead. "They're calling," I said. "Good," he replied. "It means they're nervous." "What's our move?" "We file for exclusive temporary custody today," he said, "and we initiate eviction." I closed my eyes. "They'll explode." "They already did," he said calmly. "This just makes it official." I scanned the papers again, the title, the dates. "Do it," I said. By noon, the filings were submitted. By 1, Thomas emailed confirmation. By 2, my mother showed up at the motel. I saw her car first, parked crooked, engine still running. She didn't knock. She pounded. "Eliza," she shouted through the door. "Open this right now." I stayed seated on the bed, phone recording, door locked. "You have 5 seconds to leave," I said through the door. "Then I call the police." "You can't hide forever," she snapped. "You're tearing this family apart." I stood and walked closer to the door, keeping my voice level. "You tore it apart the moment you lied to my child." Silence. Then, quieter. "You owe us." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Check the paperwork." Her voice rose again, panic slipping through. "You don't understand what you've done." "I understand exactly," I said. "That's why you need to leave." Footsteps, a car door slamming, tires peeling away. I waited a full minute before sitting back down. My hands were steady. That afternoon, I picked Marlo up from school myself. She ran to me, backpack bouncing, face bright. "Can we get fries?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Extra ketchup." We ate in the motel room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, watching something loud and ridiculous on TV. She laughed with her whole body, like she hadn't done that in days. Later, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Are we staying here?" "For a little while," I said. She considered that. Okay, children don't need certainty, they need honesty. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop again. Thomas's final email sat unread. Eviction notices scheduled for delivery. I read it once, then again. They thought the papers were a formality. They thought I wouldn't read past the assurances, wouldn't notice whose name carried the weight. They were wrong. Because the moment they voted my daughter out of my life, the paperwork stopped being a safety net for them. It became the lever, and I had just pulled it. The eviction notices went out the next morning. Not with drama, not with a speech. Just certified envelopes, stamped and scheduled, moving through the system the way consequences always do when they're no longer emotional. Thomas Reed called me at 9:17 a.m. "They'll get them by noon," he said. "Once that happens, everything changes." I stared at the motel wall, peeling paint curling near the ceiling. "How long do they have?" 30 days, he replied. "No extensions." I exhaled slowly. "They're going to lose it." "They already have," he said. "They just don't know it yet." I hung up and packed Marlowe's lunch. Normal things mattered now. Apple slices, a note in her bag, the pink sweater she liked even though it was already warm outside. At school drop-off, she hesitated for half a second before letting go of my hand. "You'll be here?" she asked. "Yes," I said immediately. "Same place, same time." She nodded and ran inside. I sat in the car for a moment after, hands on the wheel, grounding myself. I didn't warn them. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. Warnings are for people you're still negotiating with. At 12:42 p.m., my phone exploded. Judith first, then Franklin, then Paige. Text after text, each more frantic than the last. "What is this? You can't do this to us. This is illegal. Call me now." I didn't answer. At 1:05, Franklin showed up at Brookside Medical Pavilion. I was charting when I heard my name. Too loud, too sharp. I looked up to see him at the end of the corridor, red-faced, eviction notice crushed in his fist. Patients turned, nurses froze. 5 minutes, I said calmly, stepping out from behind the desk. "That's all you get." "I want an explanation," he snapped. "You already got one," I replied, "in writing." He followed me into a side hallway, close enough for security to see, far enough not to cause a scene. "You blindsided us," he said. "Your mother is hysterical." "You voted my daughter out," I said evenly. "This is what happens next." "You're abusing a loophole," he accused. "That house was ours." "It was never yours," I said. "You just lived in it." He stepped closer. "We raised you." I met his eyes. "And I repaid you. With interest." His voice dropped. "You think this makes you powerful?" I smiled slightly. "No, it makes me finished." Judith arrived 10 minutes later. She didn't yell, she cried. Real tears this time, streaking her makeup, hands shaking as she clutched my arm. "Please," she said. "You can't do this." I gently removed her hand. "You should have thought of that," I said quietly. "Before you told my child I didn't want her." Her face collapsed. Paige stood behind her, arms crossed, fury barely contained. "You're destroying everything," she spat. I looked at her. Really looked. "No," I said. "I'm stopping it." Security appeared at the end of the hall. I nodded once. "That's your 5 minutes," I said. They were escorted out, Judith crying, Franklin shouting, Paige glaring like she'd never forgive me. I watched them go without moving. That night, Marlo and I ate takeout on the motel bed again. She told me about a spelling test, about a girl who braided her hair at recess, about how the teacher smiled when she raised her hand. She didn't ask about my parents. That was the quietest victory of all. After she fell asleep, I checked my email. One new message from Thomas. Protective order granted. Temporary custody confirmed. Eviction in motion. I sat back against the headboard and closed my eyes. They thought force would scare me. They thought noise would bring me back in line. They never noticed that I stopped responding the moment I realized something simple. I didn't need their permission to protect my child. I needed distance. And I was finally far enough away to see clearly. The house went quiet after the protective order. Not peaceful, just hollow. Judith stopped calling. Franklin stopped showing up. Paige disappeared completely, like she'd evaporated once there was nothing left to take. The noise that had filled my life for so long didn't fade gradually. It shut off, abruptly, like someone had flipped a breaker. I didn't trust it. Silence from people like them was never surrender. It was strategy. Thomas Reed confirmed that a week later. They've filed an objection, he said over the phone, claiming shared ownership, emotional coercion, verbal agreements. I laughed under my breath. They really think that's enough? They're hoping you won't want the mess, he replied. They're hoping you'll compromise. I looked around the motel room, Marlowe's shoes lined neatly by the wall, her homework spread across the desk, the small routines we'd built out of nothing. No, I said. I won't. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. I didn't bring Marlowe. I dropped her at school, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd see her at 3. She didn't ask where I was going. She trusted the pattern now. That trust felt heavier than fear. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. I sat alone on one side of the room, my folder open, my hands folded in my lap. They arrived together. Judith clutched her purse like a shield. Franklin stared straight ahead. Paige walked in last, sunglasses on indoors, jaw tight with resentment. She didn't look at me. Good. The judge listened, patient, unimpressed. Judith spoke first. About family, about sacrifice, about how she'd helped raise Marlowe. The judge nodded, then asked, "Do you have legal custody?" Judith faltered. "Well, no, but—" Franklin jumped in, voice rising. "The house was ours for decades." Thomas stood. "Then you shouldn't have transferred the title." The room went very still. Paige scoffed, loudly. The judge looked at her. "Is there something you'd like to add?" Paige hesitated, then leaned forward. "She manipulated us. She knew what she was doing." I met her eyes for the first time. "Yes," I said calmly. "I read the documents." The judge looked down at the file, then back up. "This property belongs to Ms. Warren. The eviction stands." Judith's breath left her in a sound that was almost a sob. Franklin's face darkened. "This isn't fair." The judge's voice was flat. "Fairness has nothing to do with ownership." Gavel down. "Done." Outside the courthouse, Paige finally turned on me. "You planned this," she said, voice shaking with rage. "You waited." I didn't stop walking. I survived. Judith reached for my arm. "Please," she said. "We don't have anywhere to go." I stepped back. "You should have thought about that," I replied, not unkindly, "before you decided my child was disposable." Franklin stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "You're cold," he said. I shook my head. "I'm finished." They didn't follow me. That afternoon, I signed the lease termination on the motel room and picked up the keys to a small apartment across town. Nothing special. Clean, quiet. Hours. Marlowe ran from room to room like she was mapping safety. "This one's mine," she declared, claiming the smaller bedroom. "Yes," I said. "It is." That night, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Are they coming here?" "No," I said. "They're not allowed." She nodded once, satisfied, and rolled over. I sat on the floor outside her door for a while after, listening to her breathe. The house was officially scheduled for move-out inspection the following Monday. Thomas handled everything. Locks, timelines, notices. I didn't go. Some closures don't require witnesses. On Sunday evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We didn't think you'd actually do it." I stared at the screen, then blocked the number without replying. They still didn't understand. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Because the house had never been theirs in the way that mattered. And my life, my child, had never been up for a vote. I turned off the light and went to bed, knowing one thing with certainty. When people lose control, they don't change. They reveal themselves. And I was finally done explaining what they'd shown me. The first week in the apartment felt unreal. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing did. No pounding on the door. No frantic messages. No sudden appearances in parking lots or school hallways. Just quiet. Marlowe adapted faster than I did. She unpacked her things with purpose, lining her books along the shelf, taping her drawings to the wall with crooked confidence. She decided the corner by the window was for reading and declared the kitchen table homework only, as if rules could make a place permanent. I let her. I needed to see it become real too. My days settled into a rhythm that felt almost suspiciously gentle. Drop-off at Oak Hollow Elementary, work at Lakeshore Family Clinic, pick up at 3, dinner that didn't come out of a box unless we wanted it to. Evenings that didn't end with me bracing for the next problem. Still, I stayed alert. People like my parents didn't disappear. They waited. Thomas Reed confirmed that when he called midweek. "They're reaching out through extended family," he said, testing the perimeter. "I figured," I replied. "Do you want me to respond?" "No," I said. "Silence is working." He paused. "You know they'll say you're being cruel." I looked at Marlo, sitting cross-legged on the floor, braiding yarn into a lopsided bracelet. She was humming. Soft, off-key, but steady. "I know," I said. "Let them." That night, my aunt left a voicemail, concerned, sympathetic, carefully neutral. "Your mother is struggling," she said. "Maybe just a conversation?" I didn't return the call. Not because I was angry. Because I was done negotiating my child's safety through other people's comfort. Marlo didn't ask about them anymore. That was the part that scared me at first. The absence of questions. The way she no longer tested the boundaries by whispering, "Are we okay?" before falling asleep. But then I realized she wasn't suppressing fear. She was forgetting it. On Friday afternoon, she brought home a permission slip for a field trip. I signed it immediately. She watched me, then smiled and skipped off to her room. It was a small thing. It felt monumental. That evening, as I washed dishes, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Your father is ill. You should know." No greeting, no details, just obligation wrapped in urgency. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed one sentence. "Direct communication should go through my lawyer." I blocked the number. The relief came faster this time. Saturday morning, we went to the park. Marlo ran ahead, fearless now, shouting for me to watch her climb. I sat on a bench with my coffee and realized something had shifted again. I wasn't scanning for exits. I wasn't waiting for disaster. I was present. Later, while she napped on the couch, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final housing documents Thomas had sent over. Everything was complete. Locks changed, access revoked, utilities transferred. Clean. I filed the paperwork away and closed the computer. No victory speech, no celebration. Just finality. That night, Marlo asked if she could invite a friend over someday. "Yes," I said without hesitation. She beamed. "Okay, I'll ask." I lay awake later, thinking about all the years I'd mistaken noise for strength, control for care, endurance for love. Silence, I was learning, wasn't weakness. It was space. Space to heal, space to choose, space to stop explaining myself to people who never listened. When I turned off the light, my phone buzzed one last time. An email from Thomas. "No further filings. Case effectively closed unless they escalate." I set the phone down. They wouldn't escalate. People who lose control rarely risk exposing themselves further. They retreat, they rewrite, they blame, and I let them. Because while they were busy telling a version of the story where they were the victims, I was building something quieter, something solid, something no one could take away. The call came on a Tuesday. I was halfway through lunch at Lakeshore Family Clinic, chart open, coffee cooling beside me, when the front desk paged my name. The tone was off. Too careful. "There's someone here asking for you," the receptionist said. At the entrance, my stomach tightened. I didn't ask who, I already knew. I walked down the hall slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I was done running toward problems. When I turned the corner, I saw Judith standing by the glass doors, coat buttoned wrong, hair pulled back too tightly. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just contained. She smiled when she saw me. Relief flashed across her face like she'd won something. "Eliza," she said, stepping forward. "Thank God. We need to talk." I didn't move closer. "You can't be here." "I just want 5 minutes," she said quickly. "I won't cause a scene." "You already are," I replied. "Leave." Her smile faltered. Your father. Stop, I said. This is your warning. People were watching now, patients in chairs, a nurse pausing mid-step. The security guard near the desk straightened. Judith lowered her voice. I went to the school. My vision narrowed. What did you say? I asked. I didn't go inside, she rushed. I just wanted to see her. From the sidewalk. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You're under a protective order. I know, she said, tears welling. But I'm her grandmother. You lost that right, I said, my voice flat. The moment you lied to her. She reached for my arm. Security moved instantly. Ma'am, the guard said, stepping between us. You need to leave. Judith looked at me one last time, desperation spilling over. She deserves family. She deserves safety, I replied. And you are not it. She was escorted out without another word. I stood there long after the doors closed, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing louder than it should have. At 3 o'clock, I picked Marlo up from school myself. She ran toward me like nothing in the world had ever been wrong, backpack bouncing, hair loose from its tie. Mama, she said, can we go to the library? Yes, I said, anywhere you want. We didn't go home right away. We walked. We read. We sat in a quiet corner with sunlight slanting across the floor. When we finally got back to the apartment, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas Reed. They violated the order. School proximity counts. Do you want to proceed? I stared at the screen. Marlo sat at the table, coloring carefully inside the lines. Yes, I typed. The response came quickly. I'll file. This will escalate. I closed my eyes. So be it. 2 days later, Franklin tried. Not in person. Through an email sent to my work address. Long, rambling, accusing me of cruelty, of overreaction, of tearing apart what little family remained. I forwarded it to Thomas without comment. Paige followed with a social media post. Vague, emotional, about betrayal, about being cut off without explanation. I blocked her without reading the comments. On Friday afternoon, the police came to the apartment. Not for me. For paperwork. The officer was polite, almost apologetic. We're serving a no-contact extension, he said. Your parents are not permitted within 200 yards of you or your child. Any further attempts will result in charges. I signed, calm, steady. When the door closed, Marlo looked up from her book. Was that about me? She asked. Yes, I said. She nodded once. Okay. That night, as I tucked her in, she hesitated. They won't come again, right? No, I said without hesitation. They won't. She believed me. That mattered. Later, alone at the kitchen table, I finally let myself feel it. Not fear, not anger. Finality. They had tried everything they knew how to do. Pressure, guilt, public scenes, private manipulation. And none of it worked. Because this time, I hadn't reacted. I'd responded. There's a difference people like them never understand until it's too late. Reaction feeds them. Response ends it. As I turned off the light and headed to bed, my phone buzzed one last time. A notification from Thomas. Order confirmed. This is as final as it gets. I set the phone down and stood in the quiet apartment, listening to my daughter breathe in the next room. They had tried one last time, and failed. Because this story was no longer about what they wanted. It was about what I was willing to protect. The paperwork arrived in an unremarkable envelope. No warning label, no urgency stamp, just clean, official confirmation that everything had ended exactly the way it was supposed to. Protective order, permanent. Custody, undisputed. Property rights, confirmed. I read each line once, then slid the papers into a folder and placed it on the shelf with the rest of the documents that had carried us here. Not trophies, tools, proof of a line finally held. Life didn't explode into happiness after that. It softened. Mornings stopped beginning with my heart racing. Marlo woke on her own, padded into the kitchen, and sat at the table while I made toast. She talked about school projects and recess drama like nothing else in the world could interrupt her. Sometimes she forgot her jacket. Sometimes I forgot my coffee. Nothing bad happened. That was the miracle. At Lakeshore Family Clinic, I settled into my schedule. I learned which patients preferred silence and which needed stories. I left on time. I went home without checking my phone every 5 minutes, without bracing for a new crisis disguised as concern. One evening, Marlo brought home a drawing. It was our apartment. 2 figures inside. A sun above the roof. On the door, she'd written a word slowly, carefully. Home. I taped it to the fridge and stood there longer than necessary, letting the meaning land where fear used to live. The house across town rented easily. The income was steady, predictable. I opened a savings account in Marlowe's name and set up an automatic transfer. Nothing dramatic. Just consistency. That was the theme now. Consistency over chaos, presence over permission, peace over proving anything. A month later, a card arrived from Vivian Hale. No return address. A few careful lines wishing Marlo well and acknowledging my boundaries. I didn't reply. Not every olive branch needs to be picked up. Some just need to be left where they fall. I didn't hear from my parents again. No calls, no emails, no messages through relatives. At first, I waited for that to hurt. It didn't. Grief doesn't always arrive with pain. Sometimes it comes with relief. One rainy afternoon, as Marlo and I walked home from the park, she stopped suddenly and turned to me. Mama? Yes? Thank you for not letting them keep me. I knelt in front of her, rain dotting my sleeves, and took her hands. I will never let anyone decide your worth, I said. Not me. Not them. Not anyone. She smiled, satisfied, and skipped ahead. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the table with a cup of tea and a blank notebook. I didn't write about what happened. I didn't list injustices or victories. I wrote plans. Small ones, real ones, the kind that don't need witnesses. As I closed the notebook, a final truth settled into place. Quiet, steady, unmovable. They thought they could vote my daughter out of my life, so I voted something else in. Safety, boundaries, a future built slowly, deliberately, on our terms. And if you've ever stood at the edge of a decision like that, wondering whether choosing peace would cost you everything, this is what comes after. Not applause, not revenge, just a life no one gets to take from you. And sometimes, that's the only ending worth telling.